All right, so we had the pleasure of having a conversation a little bit before this the other day, and I think that the interesting thing when we talk about life after the streaming wars is that I think what we're really talking about is about the maturation of the streaming sector and the move from user acquisition and growth solely to one of profitability and engagement. So starting off from there, since we have three people who are all strategically focused in their day jobs, Will, would love to talk a little bit about how that's influencing the kinds of metrics that you all are thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, just thanks to UCLA Anderson for having us and for these comfortable chairs. We're used to those director chairs sometimes at these panels, and this is nice. You can sit back and enjoy a good conversation. So I have been at Pluto TV for almost 7 years now. So I've been there from really the transition of startup that was in high growth phase that was really about how do we grow our users, grow, scale. And as the business has grown and matured, it has certainly shifted to one around not just engagement, but quality engagement. How do we make sure that the users that we're bringing in are the ones that are consuming a lot of content, that are coming back, and that are frequently coming back month after month after month. And really what that does is it affects our marketing strategy, it affects our content strategy in identifying, how do we focus and really target in on content types that appeal to different audiences that are going to be the stickiest, whether it's the movies that are the action and the comedy movies that are driving people in, or the horror movies that are the ones that people are going to stick around for the longest, or the kung fu movies that are going to make people, evangelists for the business, even though it might be a small audience, the ones that are really going to stick around and love and make Pluto TV part of their lives.
Mary Louise, I know when we talk about streaming, we often talk about it as like a monolithic sector, but every streaming service is obviously at its own place in its evolution. Where is Peacock today, and how are you thinking about this moment for your service and the overall business?
Yeah, so I've been at Peacock for 4 years now, so very much been a part of Peacock's entire growth trajectory. When we started off as a free service, and that was really a strategic decision to sort of push a new late entrant into a very competitive marketplace and encourage as many people as possible to sample and try and get to know Peacock as a streamer. We then quickly pivoted to sort of the dual model of subscriptions and AVOD. Obviously, that's a better business. The ARPUs are higher. We were one of the early sort of SVODs that also maintained the advertising part of the business. And because of those two revenue streams, as we've grown and scaled, obviously, subscription revenues, you need scale and subscribers, but obviously, to optimize ad monetization, you have to have those subscribers sticking around and spending lots of time on your service. In terms of differentiation, Peacock really leaned into sports. Sports at the time was sort of still very much locked up in the traditional cable bundle. Sports has many strategic benefits. It's obviously live programming. There's a scarcity value to it that basically means we can maximize the CPMs that we're pulling from the advertiser marketplace. And it's premium, and the willingness to pay for those events is very high. That said, those sports are very expensive. So a big part of our strategy is to really continue to maintain and cultivate the entertainment portion of our programming. And that's all, ultimately driving to profitability. So now that we're in a more mature space, Wall Street has, changed their point of view on how they evaluate success. So 2-3 years ago, it was all about top line subscriber growth. Today, it's very much about cash flow and profitability. So in order for Peacock to hit that, it's really about managing costs, so our content decisions are more scrutinized than ever. But at the same time, we have to keep growing to essentially be able to hit break even and then ultimately become a standalone profitable service.
And Ty, coming from a marketing lens, and you're obviously working across a variety of players, and you're also thinking about the consumer. So how does this moment and where streaming is affecting how you're thinking about your piece of this?
Yeah, I work at a marketing agency called Bond, and I have the very good fortune of being able to work with all of the different streaming partners and see all of their shifts kind of happen at the same time. And I think that's a really good summary of what the shift has felt like from my standpoint, where we went from this like subscriber land grab and these large amounts of budget being poured into marketing campaigns in order to use tentpole IP in order to get those subscribers to those streamers, to this moment now where we've got to focus on profitability. I'm hearing that from everybody. And so now this is the spend. It's going to be down here. We need it to extend over time, and we need to create sustained engagement. And so how is that changing what that marketing sort of execution looks like? Which has been super interesting. And it's double interesting when you see all of those different streaming partners and studio partners doing that at the same time.
And we're seeing obviously a proliferation of choice that's in the market, and it's also tougher to activate consumers than ever before. So when we think about eventization of what the content is on streaming services, that becomes more important. Ty, just to build on that, I know you've done some work on some higher profile shows that have some good popularity, including White Lotus. Will you speak a little bit about what it takes to eventize?
Yeah, I mean, there's shows like White Lotus where it's a baked-in event, and now I have to capture that conversation, that cultural moment, and make sure that the brand is connected to that cultural moment, or at least leading that conversation, and that it's not happening completely outside of own channels. And then there's other sorts of properties. I was on Reacher in season 2, where they want to use that to continue to expand subscriber base. Reacher is classic dad TV. It's like a broadcast style TV, which I'm getting so many more briefs like that nowadays. But the goal with a show like that is, okay, we activated dads. That was Prime Video. They're doing Jack Ryan. They're doing Reacher. They're doing basically everything Tom Clancy. They got the dads on lock. But how do you take a brand like that and then start to reach into opportunity audiences? And so then, I mean, basically we had Reacher take his shirt off, and we used that in content a bunch, and then that allowed us to expand that audience. But there's a lot of, I think, sustained engagement around a brand that's starting to come back. People are frustrated with waiting for like 10 years for the next Game of Thrones season or whatever, and they want to get into something like Reacher, which can drop every year. So you've got sustained engagement in that streamer.
And Mary Louise, one of the ways that we are eventizing and seeing that really come to bear these days is in live experiences and thinking about it from a halo perspective. That's obviously something that NBCUniversal does very well. Can you speak a little bit about how you all do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the DNA of sort of legacy broadcast media companies is clearly live programming. To date, in streaming, live has not been a focus, but now we can observe that becoming more of a focus as each of the streamers looks for its sort of next white space and growth opportunities. So I'm sure many of you guys are aware and have observed a lot of the live events that now Netflix is going into. The Tom Brady roast, they did the Christmas NFL games, they did a bunch of stand-ups. So from our point of view, we've been playing the catch-up game from a streaming point of view, but we see the live white space being the next frontier. And so now there's a lot of focus thinking through how we can sort of jump into it sooner rather than later. And so we think about the assets that we have and what assets sort of lend themselves well to those big live programming moments that obviously we can eventize and sort of really bring in big audiences to a moment in time. So beyond our sports, we had the SNL 50th anniversary. The company really had a multi-platform approach and multiple programming moments. So on the weekend of the 50th anniversary, There was a homecoming concert that was broadcast and streamed on Peacock. On Sunday, there was the 50th anniversary special, a 2-hour event. And because it was broadcast on Peacock and NBC, it brought in a huge audience and broke a number of records for us. And then on top of that, to sustain the engagement, we did a couple of documentaries, a musical documentary, and then sort of a history of SNL that really continued, that big moment when we celebrated arguably one of the most iconic television shows in America. Another example of sort of eventizing, this is less live, but still sort of, I think, adjacent to sort of the spirit of what live tries to accomplish was Wicked. Obviously, Wicked was a massive theatrical success. And again, the legacy media companies being in many businesses, including the theatrical business, we strategically obviously licensed the first streaming window. So that gives us more flexibility in terms of when a movie avails itself on streaming post its theatrical release. But again, we're trying to build a continuum and a continuity where NBCUniversal owns the asset and really optimized it for theatrical, but then really there was a lot of marketing and extra content that we brought on to the service to sort of celebrate the first streaming window of the movie. And the marketing team did an absolutely wonderful campaign where literally they changed the entire look and feel of the app and even the logo to mirror the Wicked colors. So we're doing a bunch of sort of innovative things to continue to tie as much as possible some of those big IPs back to our streaming platform and building sort of an association with that.
And Will, one of the things Pluto does exceptionally well is obviously you're sitting on the power of a massive library of IP, and you're able to halo around events and lean into events in an exciting way. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that?
Yeah, and we were discussing profitability before, and really looking at the strategy of how we lean in on eventizing content and our platform allows us to continue operating with a cadence of strong events and things to market to while being profitable. We've been profitable for a number of years now, which is unique in the FAST and AVOD space. And while a number of our competitors have continued to invest in originals, we've looked to our channels and building original channels as well as creating original events and seasonal events throughout the year to really draw audiences in and market to audiences. You spoke about working across the Paramount ecosystem. Last year, we sampled over 60 different shows from across cable and Paramount Plus and the CBS network. Shows like Matlock, Tulsa King, RuPaul's Drag Race, All Stars, Landman, fantastic shows that are anchors on a number of these other platforms, but that we leverage and surround on Pluto TV as core 7-day to 30-day events where we really lean in. We find ways to create programs and package around those shows and draw audiences in to the content that also allows them to view content downstream. So I'll use Matlock as an example. Matlock, one of the biggest shows in broadcast today on CBS, we had a stunt where we had the first 8 episodes of the show in January, and that was among our most consumed content on VOD in January, but it also had the impact of elevating our classic Matlock channel, which grew to its highest number of users in over a year and a half, and also on VOD, it was up about, I think, 30% in the classic library. And then we also were able to promote back to the CBS network, so when that show came back in February on the CBS network, it had a new growing developing audience that had found the show potentially on Pluto TV. So really kind of leaning into that IP and creating that halo that helps both upstream and across Pluto TV. In addition, we look across our calendar and say what are different packages and events that we can lean into with the content that we have. We just launched our April Ghouls campaign at the beginning of this month. horror has always been such a great category for us every October, and a lot of companies, including us, have always put a lot of effort behind that category. And so now we launched a halfway to Halloween program that hits on marketing and hits on programming and allows us not just to focus on a horror channel or our terror channel, but lets us aggregate our Walking Dead channel, our Supernatural channel, all types of movies like Paranormal Activity and the Friday the 13th franchise, and create this cross-platform event that we can promote to, that allows people not just to come in for one channel or one piece of content, but to find and discover content throughout the platform. This summer, we're doing our Summer of Cinema campaign again, where we have top blockbuster movies, everyone's favorite hits like the Mission Impossible franchise, the Indiana Jones franchise. And as part of that, we extend to local movie theaters and create this incredible free experience for people to come view movies at their local cinema on the weekends for free in a partnership with Pluto TV that kind of brings to life this passion for movies and cinema and reinvigorates this library of content and these blockbusters that people love.
And Ty, Will was just talking about Matlock. You were talking about Dad TV a minute ago. So as we're talking about growth, we are seeing that older audiences is one of the places where there is still growth in the market available. And you mentioned that is something you're seeing in your briefs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, because we're talking about the eventization of, and that's great, but you need those special properties like a White Lotus in order to create these events that are truly like 4-quad cultural moments. And I love where we're at right now, where you're trying to be a little bit more targeted. You're trying to optimize, I think, the content that you already have in order to reach into audiences that are a little bit more targeted than what we were doing before. It's the optimization moment instead of the land grab moment. And Dad TV is one of those, where I continually now am getting briefs for what feel like old school broadcast TV properties that are either new or that are being refreshed or that are inspired by older properties. And I'm so excited by that, because you have to get creative about how to use them. They're weekly releases. They're a little bit easier to digest in a time when nothing in this world is easy to digest. I'm all for that. And it feels like the goal now is creating sort of a sustained ecosystem with a lot of different touch points instead of trying to swing for homers with every sort of property, which is fun too, but it's a different sort of challenge.
And Mary Louise, are you seeing that in your viewership makeup, and has that affected some of the content choices that Peacock is making? The older audiences?
The older audiences, absolutely, yeah. So when we look at sort of the transition of TV time from linear, it's obviously going down. We hypothesize where will it go, and obviously every content category is different. But we believe that the older audiences, the later adopters of streaming, and we see it, that's where the time grab is a big opportunity. So as we think about our programming selections, we obviously keep that audience very much in mind, especially as we look to transition our legacy brands from linear to streaming eventually, because we know that linear won't last forever. And look, from an advertiser point of view, in general, advertisers, they're very sophisticated. Obviously, there's specific demos, specific brands are chasing. That said, though, older audiences, people are living longer, people are healthier, they have a lot of disposable income. So, one shouldn't just assume older audiences are not attractive to advertisers. They are.
And on the other end of the spectrum, when we think about Gen Z and millennials, there's obviously a lot of chatter about Gen Z, Gen Alpha, millennials, and their viewership habits, and the preference for social media content. It's often framed as an either or, but I do think, Will, we are seeing that younger consumers have gravitated to fast channels. Can you talk a little bit about the younger end of the spectrum and what Pluto's doing with younger consumers?
Yeah, and I think also just because audiences might be younger doesn't mean that they're watching content that might be older, or rediscovering content that is older. When you look at just time and time again shows that continue to pop and have resurgences and new life. I think one of the strategies that we've employed since the beginning of Pluto TV is leaning into the human element and the emotional element of people behind the scenes curating and building the channels and programming that you see on Pluto TV. We have almost 50 folks across our programming team in the US alone that are dissecting the content, that are connecting their passion, their expertise, their background into making these channels and leaning in on the content verticals that they focus on. There was a great profile on someone on our editorial team that focuses on the anime category, and that's something that we launched as an area that we've had success with, that we've seen a lot of passionate engagement, particularly among younger audiences, that we wanted to explore further and have expanded with more channels, as well as a team that really knows that space and focuses on it. But also, I think the ability to be reactive and part of the culture by bringing people behind the programming. Just by way of example, when Val Kilmer passed away, it was this immediate, okay, he's been in so many films that resonate with our audience and that are important to our audience. So within minutes, we across teams, whether programming, marketing, content rights, went into our library, went to partners, figured out kind of what we could do in tribute. How could we get the Doors movie up? How could we get the Ghost in the Darkness? How can we potentially get Top Gun when it wasn't on our platform the day before? How can we get it 2 days later up on the platform? And connect with our audience, and knowing that they're going to want to have some experience and have some connection with one of their favorite actors and films that are nostalgic and create that emotional experience for them.
And so when we think about, we're talking a lot about strategy and sort of bigger picture, but there's also the executional components of it, which we don't talk about as much in panels like this, but I think it's something that's important because it does take up a big part of all of our jobs. So Ty, when you're thinking from a marketing perspective, one of the things we had talked about is activating consumers across platforms that as a marketer you don't control. Can you talk a little bit about some of the practical realities of what that means for you in your role?
Yeah, sure. My specific role at Bond is I head up accounts on the digital and social side. So this is my day-to-day. I live this in and out, and it changes all the time. And I think, thinking about younger audiences, it's not that they don't want to watch long-form content. We were talking about this the other day, and maybe my mind isn't made up. I think they want to be a part. They want to connect with other people. They feel isolated. They want to connect with other people who have the same sort of authentic emotional connection to a property that they do. And the way that you connect on Reddit is completely different than the way that you connect on TikTok, is completely different than the way that you connect all across that social media ecosystem. And so my job in the day-to-day is to say, okay, the next episode of White Lotus is coming up. The Walter Goggins meme is going to happen, and everybody is going to want to talk about that or use that in their own way. I even saw that getting used on LinkedIn. That was wild. But then we have to think about how to capture that, whether it's short form clip in TikTok, how we're going to extend it on TikTok, or what that conversation is going to look like as like a deeper dive into the episode on Reddit, and then be ready to try and own and extend that conversation on those platforms instead of just letting it take its own life, which is okay too, but you want to keep that brand connected to it.
And just to build on that, I think when we think about younger audiences, of course, and programming to them, it's not just what they're watching, it's where they're watching. So obviously the next generation of audiences are much more mobile heavy. So as Peacock and NBC look to the future, we understand that we have to adjust our product and technology to be able to produce content that can be mobile first. So we're thinking about sort of, vertical video, what kind of formats and shows can we start making that will be accessible through the mobile. Yes, younger generations are spending less time on long form and streaming in general because so much of their time is consumed by social and gaming and all these other entertainment formats. So as we look to the future, we also want to understand how we can tap in to those platforms, whether it's, identifying the next generation of influencers and creators that understand sort of the cultural things that matter to the younger audiences and figure out, can we launch things more in short form and maybe transition them into long form formats in success? There's so many formats launching on YouTube that sort of take fire. Netflix, for example, recently there was a format called Pop the Balloon, a very fun dating format. They've now grabbed that. They're going to create a long form version of that series. So we also look to these not so emerging anymore platforms in terms of the entertainment and content that's being created. Then we think through, well, what is the connectivity we can leverage to then bring those audiences onto sort of the bread and butter of our business, which is premium long-form content.
And Will, from Pluto's perspective, you have with your service both the linear viewing discoverability of the channel surfing activity, and then you also have an on-demand aspect to your service. I know that you all recently did a user interface overhaul. Would love to hear you talk a little bit about how you approach the user experience aspect of what you do.
Yeah, so when the fast channel business, when we pioneered it, I think we're at 11 years. So we celebrated our 11th year anniversary on April Fool's Day this year. So it was this contrarian idea at the time when everyone was going lean in, VOD, subscription. We were lean back, good old fashioned linear television and linear networks, and really that familiarity with the channel guide and that not having to make a choice or a decision was something that resonated with audiences and really, again, kind of pioneered this new wave of digital television that was very familiar. However, there are still so many opportunities for people to find and discover more content. There's only so much that you can program in a day on a channel guide that has the number of channels that's manageable to search through and find something. So we've really continued to lean in and develop the VOD part, the video on demand part of our product, to really tap into both the, call it, core user acquisition area of the platform, things that are splashy, highly marketable, that we want to make sure are on everyone's radar in a given moment, that you're able to market to and deep link to, as well as really focus on the long tail of content where we can tap into niche programming, things that are passions, things that people are going to really want to lean in and search and seek out. And combining both that fast lean back experience and that lean in experience of VOD, kind of marrying those two products is where we see really the future and the area of that consumption. We see the people who are spending time on both areas of the product far more engaged, far more likely to come back. And so we launched a dedicated home area within our product that allows you to see kind of the best of fast and the best of VOD that caters to your interests and your watch history and what you want to watch the most. So I think as we continue to look for where consumers are finding content, how they're discovering it, and trying to find new ways to add new content in a way where there's only so much shelf space within the fast channel space, we're going to continue building and leaning in on that VOD product.
There's no shortage of headwinds facing the industry. Anyone who knows me knows that I am an eternal optimist. So wanted to ask each of you, when you think about the next 24 to 36 months, what are you most excited about? Where do you see opportunities coming from? Mary Louise, we'll start with you.
I think that the industry will continue to consolidate, and while consolidation may feel scary, I do think it's the right path forward. Ultimately, I think there's going to be the great rebundling, which I think will just simplify choices and selections for consumers. So it's actually going to be better for consumers. With a sort of bundled or consolidated world, from an investment profile, the investment's just going to become more efficient from the supplier side of the world. And so I'm hoping that we're just going to be in a much cleaner, less fragmented place where each, of the surviving, let's say it's 4 to 5 players ultimately, will have a clear brand, a clear mission in terms of what needs they're serving for the consumers. And hopefully we'll be in an environment where we're setting up a win-win ecosystem for businesses and consumers alike.
I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about Gen Z, but I think the thing I'm most excited about right now is that in a moment like this, I feel like it's a big shake, and then you see the new things that rise to the top, and you're seeing like A24 and Neon and studios like that start to compete in a bigger, more major way for audience. And I feel like the same thing will happen in TV, where you have these fresh new voices that have a chance to pop up. We were, at the end of last year, we did a movie called Sidelined, The QB and Me. Anybody? No? It was a top release for Tubi at the time. It was one of their best releases of the time, and it is so Gen Z core targeted. It was based on a Wattpad fan fiction. Wattpad? Anybody? And it was their top release at the time, and I think that's what's going to happen next. That's what's exciting, is instead of kind of doing the same old thing, we're going to get these sort of new stories that are super hyper targeted at particular audiences, and that feel like it's a breakthrough in the way that the types of stories that are being told. It feels super fresh. That's what I'm the most excited about.
When I started at Pluto TV 7 years ago, we had to beg people for content. It was knocking on every door of every studio and distributor. And while I was a content buyer, I was spending my time basically selling people on the idea of why the FAST business would help grow their business and reach new audiences and help monetize their catalog. I remember physically carrying a TV into an office in Beverly Hills so I could set up a demo of what this was and what it looked like. And now when you look at every studio, every distributor, they're launching their own FAST channels. They're building out their own portfolio, which is, I think, frustrating but validating at the same time, in that they're coming with channel ideas and packages that we've been pitching them 5-6 years ago. But I think understanding that this free space is now a critical component of everyone's distribution strategy, that when you think of what traditional windows were in TV and film, now understanding that we are a stop and an early stop in how to build, grow, and sustain these businesses. And that is spreading not just from traditional television and film, but into the sports space, into the news space, and areas where companies want to really make sure that they're reaching consumers and that they're able to engage people with their highest production and their highest level of content. So I think just the stakes have continued to grow, and the level of content and accessibility has continued to grow too.
I would be remiss, since we are at UCLA and here on a campus, to not ask each of you, to talk a little bit about any advice you have for any students that might be in the audience, particularly those that are interested in going into a strategy role. A lot of young people I talk to are really interested in strategy, but not really sure how to break into that part of the business.
Yeah, so I would recommend for you guys to maximize your time while you're studying, to also get as much experience as possible. I'm a UCLA alumni. I came here from England. Part of the reason why I chose to do my MBA at UCLA was because I had a desire to break into the entertainment industry in a strategic role. And I figured that if I was in LA for 2 years, I could optimize my time and get to know as many people as possible, get to know as many functional opportunities as possible and businesses, and really learn about what opportunities existed and finding my own fit for those. And so I really recommend doing as many academic internships as possible. We've sort of shared with you today where we see the industry going. So you guys should go out there, try and get experience, explore platform services that are in the AVOD business, explore platform services that are UGC, explore platform services that are more traditional, streaming and AVOD, because the strategy rolls everywhere. And even if it's not the right fit for you, you'll learn something and you'll become smarter and more valuable to any company in the industry, because we're sort of all in it together, competing with each other against each other. So there is no experience that's not valuable. So yeah, go and get those internships.
We have, in all of our pitch decks, a secret sauce slide, and our secret sauce slide is a triangle, and on one part of the triangle is audience, on the next part is the soul of a story, what we would, and on the third corner is platform. And if I was launching into this right now, I guess my advice, which feels like a lot of work, but you have to be able to find the marriage between those things. You have to be able to come and say, I understand this story deeply. I understand the pillars that make the story work. I also understand the audience the story is for deeply, not demographically, not by age, none of that, but by interest. I understand what they're interested in. I understand what they want to talk about already, regardless of that story, and I understand where they're talking about it online. And then platform gets into how this fits into the ecosystem for a lot of our clients, but also how the social ecosystem is a part of then capturing that intersection between what the story has to say and what that audience wants to talk about in the first place, and how best to tell that story on each platform. That's the strategy, I guess, secret sauce for everything we do, and that's what I would want to impart.
Yeah. Say don't just kind of track and follow the trends and what's new. Experience it. Play with the products. We always ask in our interviews at Pluto TV, we'll ask people what their favorite channel was. And the number of people who've come and interviewed over the course of the years who you realize hadn't even opened the product and played around and experienced it, it's kind of mind-boggling. So understand what those trends are. Watch the UCLA women's basketball game tonight in the Final Four. Everyone knows that women's basketball is continuing to grow massively in terms of audience and reach, but watch the game, see what advertisers are doing now in integrating these incredible athletes and the business that they're driving, and live and breathe that, so you're not just quoting what's said in articles, and root for UCLA for sure. But yeah.
And the only thing I would add to that is a lot of the data shows that the biggest single impact that an employee can have on their own career is who they work for. So make sure that you are not just focusing on someone choosing you, you're also focusing on choosing them. Do your research, ask about the individual, the team that you're considering, have a list of people that are your dream people you'd want to work with in this business, and don't be afraid to reach out to them. And once you find someone that believes in you, don't be afraid to stick with them a little bit, even if you don't see the immediate opportunity on the horizon. So with that, thank you all. We're right at time.
Thank you.
Hey.